Hello, and welcome to Breaking the Guard. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about an old war story of mine. This is one time I took a really short notice fight, and this became probably my best MMA fight, which was in BodogFIGHT Season 4 in Costa Rica. Now, uh, some background into this, because if you're new, chances are you don't know anything about BodogFIGHT or what that was. Uh, in the early 2007, 8, 9 era, BodogFIGHT was a new promotion that was coming out that was being funded by a very wealthy guy in Canada, Calvin, which was part of a casino, like an online casino, something to that effect. And he was trying to create a valid competitor to the UFC. Now, unfortunately, obviously it went defunct, but he was throwing all sorts of money at it, and the production values were pretty high at the time. And to this day, I asked people because many people on this season that I was in, we had Jake Shields, Roy Nelson, um, man, my names are slipping me, Chael Sonnen, uh, Cain Velasquez, lots of famous fighters and eventual champions and UFC stars. Like the treatment that we got from BodogFIGHT was above any other promotion to this day. So they really went out of their way to give like Hollywood style treatment. And that might have been a part of the problem as far as budgeting was concerned. But in any case, my brother and I had been coaching George Masvidal. Because, and if you don't know, like George Masvidal started MMA training with my brother and we got him up to I think like 11-1 or 12-1 career before we had differences of opinion, and he switched teams. But at the time, he was fighting with that promotion. I had taken him to two fights, one in Costa Rica, one in St. Petersburg, Russia. He's won both, and this was supposed to be his third fight there. And I also had two other fighters that was supposed to be joining us. So I was supposed to go down to coach three fighters in Costa Rica because they were doing two seasons simultaneously. It was 30 something fights in basically 3 days consecutively. Kind of a crazy thing to do. And I was nursing an injury at the time. My knee was pretty bummed. I wasn't able to grapple or wrestle at all. And I had popped a rib on this side. So I was just running and coaching more than I was actually training. And what ended up happening was George had a knee injury as well, so he had to pull out of the fight. Then one of my fighters had a visa issue, and decided to tell me like 2 weeks before. And then another one fell out. I think it was another visa issue, right? Because both of them were Cubans. So this put me in a very terrible spot as a coach because when I was talking to the matchmaker, Miguel Iterado, I felt so embarrassed because I'm like, my God, like how am I supposed to look like I know what I'm doing here when I had three fighters just vanish, 2 weeks out of the event. So, but I had to make the call. So I spoke to him, and I don't know what possessed me, but as I was speaking to him, I said, "Hey, for the one, the heavyweight fight, I'll take my guy's spot, right? And not heavyweight; it would have been light heavyweight, 205." And then he's like, "Oh, okay." And at the time, my record was 1-0, so not very intimidating for most people. The guy that I was replacing, Ariel Ganduya, was at the time must have been 4-0 or 5-0. Solid wrestler. He had some power. And the opponent he was facing was Anthony Rea, which was a guy with 50 something fights. A veteran. He had a mixed record, right? I forget what the record was, but he had a lot of fights and more wins than losses. So not an easy fight to jump into on 2 weeks' notice. In my view, because I was studying the tape, because I was setting up the strategy for Ariel, He looked like somebody who was easier to take down, that was willing to stay on the ground and not try to stand up. So the strategy was going to be take him down, ground and pound, right? And in my view, watching the videos that we had at the time, it looked like he's a tall, lanky guy. So I'm like, oh, very skinny, long legs, but easy to take him down, right? I'm short, stocky, so that will favor me getting underneath him. And despite the injuries I had going and lack of training, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And I was supposed to fly 3 days after I made that decision to Costa Rica because in Bodog, they wanted to have a lot of B-roll or whatnot. So you would go there like 10 days before, a week before, and they would, do all this footage beforehand. So you had to have, basically my training camp was going to be in Costa Rica. And I remember before the fight, I'm like, okay, well, I got to do get some sparring sessions here, because this is probably going to be like the safest sparring I'm going to be able to do. And I was going with one of the guys that had the visa issue, smaller than me. So I'm like, okay, should be pretty safe. I told him, hey, look, whatever you do, don't hit me to the body on this side. My ribs popped. I was even wearing the Taekwondo, body protector. This guy, we start, sparring, gets me in the clinch and throws a round knee, poof, right into my rib, and it pops. And I was so freaking upset. I'm like, what right? Like, again, not the smartest guy, right? Or just a dick. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know how much more obvious I could have made it, right? And I remember that stopped the training. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to fly out tomorrow. And this was the day before I had to fly. I'm like, I guess I'm flying out tomorrow. My rib freshly popped. Uh, so I'm not really sure what I was thinking because pretty crazy in retrospect. Like I wouldn't let one of my fighters go in that condition, right? Uh, but nevertheless, took the flight, went to Costa Rica, and it was beautiful, right? This was probably my like fourth or fifth time there because Costa Rica at the time was hosting lots of fights. I think because of the online casinos, money was being funneled around, and we were on the west coast. I think in this resort El Barcelo, uh, really beautiful. They had you have to keep in mind there's 30 or 32 fights over the course of 3 days, and that means there is like 60 fighters and the entourage for each camp, which is probably at least two or three fighters, or two or three coaches. So easily over 100 people in the fight game, all in one hotel. And then you have to consider all the Bodog people. So like the whole resort was basically fighters. You had like a handful of civilians. The rest of it was just fighters. So it was very interesting, right? I remember they would do like two training sessions every day, and they would like split up. Like they would have like a like a blue corner, red corner type thing. And since I had been in a couple of Bodogs, I knew some of the regulars. Like one of the friends that we had made was the Dams, Rodrigo and Karina Dam, and they had actually helped me because I was injured. I wasn't able to train with Masvidal, and he also didn't have a partner, so they partnered up, and they worked out to be a good match. So I was working with them, but since I wasn't really doing any sparring or I couldn't even wrestle, I was just doing lots of pad work more or less uh, with George and my kickboxing trainer Eric Castaños. Uh, so I was just doing a lot more conditioning, really. But those training sessions were very interesting because again, there would be 30 fighters in the room because, like I said, they split them into different areas, and it was all outdoors. And it's Costa Rica, so it's like a rainforest. It's really hot, humid, very easy to sweat there. And you had this big open mat area that was covered with a roof, and you would see all sorts of people training. And man, some people train very differently, right? Like I remember, I think Pele was training. He was part of our side, And if you don't know who Pele Landi, he was an incredible kickboxer. And he was basically going full blast to the body with his poor sparring partner. And you would hear the kicks echo and slap on this guy's body from like the whole room. And it was just, I was like cringing every time, like, oh my God, right? Like, I would hate to be that guy's uke, just getting devastated. We also had I remember there was one exchange I had with Chael Sonnen. By the way, like if you guys never met him in person, super nice guy. Uh, he obviously wasn't like a big time guy yet, but he was already a well known commodity at this point. But he knew everybody's name, super respectful, never big shot at anybody. And I remember he approached me and he knew me by name, to my surprise, and he had asked me like questions on like submission defenses. And this was also an eye opener because uh, he was asking me like very basic things: how to escape a triangle choke, how to escape a arm bar, and then the one that really mystified him was how to escape a umaplata. And I like showed him the very basic, and I even prefaced it. I'm like, look, I'm not trying to insult you or anything, but I just want to show you, just in case you didn't know this. Like, if someone gets you in a plata, you forward roll. And I showed it more as a matter of fact thing, just so I was complete, because then I was going to show him, stepping over and all that. And he said, whoa, 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 go back, go back. What is this forward roll business? And that's when I realized, man, some people really don't know any groundwork at all, right? And I wasn't. Maybe he was trying to be, he's trying to be very nice to me. I don't think it was, because based off his submission losses, he really didn't have a lot of groundwork, right? Which is surprising for somebody who's a wrestler, And but that wasn't too uncommon. Like I felt like sometimes wrestlers are so like egotistical, or like they think they could just stay in their lane and not have to learn anything new, when having just a blue belt level of jiu-jitsu with world-class wrestling will make you a monster. And I've made this argument many times, particularly Kevin Randleman would probably have been the best example. In any case, still a nice guy. Best trash talker in the game for sure. And so I got to work with them, and it was cool seeing lots of people in there that I've known. Like Roy Nelson, like I said, was there, and I had grappled them already, so we're in good terms. But you also had the Diaz brothers there, because I think Jake was fighting in that card, and that's actually I think where I first met Jake Shields. Not, I think we hung out like once, but not really on a super friendly level, so to speak, but just to chit chat, as an acquaintance. But uh, the things that were weird about this was you were supposed to be in a fight camp. Again, we were fighting 10 days we were staying there 10 days. So I think for me, it was like 9 days out my fight, because I was on the second day. It's strange because it's like a vacation and a fight camp at the same time, because we're staying on a beachside resort. So you have the ocean, and they're also taking us to like exotic locations because they want to do like, these uh, B-roll films where like we're like running to the beach, or we're lifting a log, or we're doing some silly stuff like that, and or we're like zip lining, or doing weird things that you normally would not do before a fight. So uh, it was definitely a challenge as far as mindset, and I mean, there was one thing that almost it could have potentially hurt a lot of the fighters, where they were taking us on this bus to one of these locations, uh, and it's going uphill, and it's loaded with fighters, so pretty heavy. And as it's going up the hill, the car's engine starts to stall, and then the truck starts to slip back. And the bus driver is like, everyone out, everyone out. And while this bus is rolling backwards, all the fighters have to jump out of it, And then eventually he gets it to stop, and we all have to get behind it and start pushing it to try to get it to jumpstart again. It was a pretty wild moment. But yeah, so there was a lot of weird things going on there. Now, the day of the weigh-ins was the first time I actually got to go face to face and see my opponent. I hadn't seen him. I can't recall seeing him prior. Maybe like a glance, just walking down the hallway or something like that, but not really get a good look at him. And they did the weigh-ins just like, well, I think they did a ceremonial one as well, and that's the one that I remember. I don't know if they did like an off-camera one. I can't recall now. But I was so underweight. It was a 205 weight class. I think I weighed in at 189 or 191. I was so light, right? Because my weight class would have been 185. And he weighed in, I think, at 205 on the dot because he was cutting. And when we went to do face-to-face, it was more like face-to-chest because he was significantly taller than me and he was thick. So I realized then, like, oh, shit, like this is a literal David versus Goliath matchup here, right? Not my first one, but it wasn't what I was expecting. I thought it was a tall, skinny guy. Like, no, he's a big 205. And I'm like, all right, I know at least now I know what I'm getting into. And since I didn't really cut weight, there was no real incident. It was pretty easy for me. Just had to wake up, go there, and then had my normal meals, went back to bed, and fight day was very interesting because I was about to say fight night, but it wasn't a fight night. It was a fight morning. The fight started like at 10 a.m. Again, it's a weird, something that for fighters, very unusual, right? We normally fight at night. And this is not even like a time zone difference. It's in Costa Rica, so it's Central Standard Time, which would have been like 1 hour earlier than Miami time. But that's what it was. They set up the fights in the morning, and I imagine it's because it was an outdoor venue. They had it on the beach. They set up the ring, because they used a boxing ring, on the beach. So they built the whole platform. They had a little roof over the top, but it was open air. And they had like the warm-up areas with like tents around the thing. It was really bizarre. But I remember getting up. It's like, I think I got up around 9 or something like that. I'm like, okay, I got to fight in a couple hours. Started warming up. My main cornerman at the time was Masvidal, which wasn't a great bet. But unfortunately, my brother does not, had never cornered me in an MMA fight because he was too anxious. As my big brother, he was fine doing grappling, but whatever reason, MMA, he felt like he wouldn't be able to contain himself. And so he's like, I'll send Masvidal, I'll send Tigre, or my kickboxing coach, and they'll do the job. I'm like, all right, fair enough. But my mouthpiece, which I had a real mouthpiece, I was molded, was lost. And, as the cornerman, that's kind of your job to keep track of these things. So we ended up having to find a boil and bite mouthpiece, which was at the bottom of Masvidal's bag. I remember it had like a pubic hair inside of it. I had to like wash it off in the sink, and there was no microwaves or no like range, so I had to basically get a coffee maker with a hot water, put it in there enough where I can kind of bite into it. Didn't really work, but I'm like, well, I need a mouthpiece or I'm not going to be allowed to fight. This is all I got. And that's going to become an issue later. So I have this rinky-dinky mouthpiece. Then my kickboxing coach went to, as we're doing the warm-ups, starts wrapping my hands. And he is wrapping my hands very thick. Right? I'm like, dude, like this is a MMA fight, man. You're wrapping me like I'm doing boxing. Like, I'm not going to be able to grab anything. But at the moment, we were running out of time because I had to do the walkout soon, so he couldn't redo the wrap. So it's like, all right, F it, right? I guess I'm going out. Like, I'm not going to be grappling. This is just going to be a kickboxing affair against a guy who's primarily a striker. Although, to be fair, I was doing more striking at that point, so I'm like, all right, I was willing to engage. We get into the walkout. It's kind of weird because it's like this long, like L-shaped line that you have to walk through, if I recall, and it's just the sand. And then you walk into the platform, and they have the cameraman following you, it was a weird experience for me. You know, it's the first time that I was fighting, you know, in the middle of the day outside on the beach, and the crowd was just fighters. So it was like 20 or so people, and the ring girls, which were like 10 of them. Uh, and just get into the ring. It was very surreal. And my opponent was the first to walk in, so I was the second one to walk out. I did the introductions, get into the fight, and the fight was going well for me. You know, at least I felt initially he had an upper hand. He definitely, you know, connected a good leg kick on me that that spun me around. I'm like, "Oh, okay, I gotta watch for these." I did connect a good knee, and at one point, I was able to parry one of his punches and land a clean right hand. And I remember that when I hit him with the right hand, I saw his eyes roll back a little bit, and I was like, okay, I can hurt this guy, right? But shortly after that, he was able to corner me in the ring ropes, and he landed a stiff left that just crushed my nose. And at that moment, I went wrestler mode, dropped, shot in, took him down. And then I just started raining down ground and pound. And I remember the crowd going crazy, but I also remember that my nose just was leaking like a faucet. Just the ref comes in, stops it, and I'm not sure why he stopped it because they didn't have a doctor come in to check me out. He just asked me, "Do I want to continue?" I'm like, "Of course." Like, the fight just got real, right? I'm bleeding all over the place. I need to get some retribution now. This is where this same guy, who's a nice guy, his name is Troy Waugh. He was a referee. He's the same referee that's kind of goofed me with me on ADCC because he used to ref ADCC also. So like, even though we were very friendly, like he was like the worst referee for me. Like he always gave me terrible calls. And the terrible call here was he stood us up back on our feet. And I'm like, man, I was on top of this guy, right? Like, I got my nose broken, you know, and I needed to score this takedown, and I got it. And now you're gonna put me back on my feet. Like, this is like my concern now was that you guys were gonna stop the fight because if he hits me again in the nose, it's gonna be over, right? And now I have to like you penalize me, but he wasn't having it, so we had to stand up on our feet, and that was dicey. And there was one particular exchange where Anthony really caught me good. I think he threw like a uppercut left hook that connected, boom, boom, and I remember like, well, if I take any more of those, it's gonna be over, right? Like there weren't good shots to absorb. Fortunately, I was able to blast him again with a double leg, take him down, and then my pre-fight assessment was correct in that he wasn't trying to get back up to his feet. He was just trying to play guard. And I was able to really punish him with a ground and pound. And at the time, I was big on throwing overhands, like Fedor style overhands. So I was connecting a lot of big shots and doing some good damage. I was able to pass, get into mount. I did eat some up kicks from him that made me think twice about standing up again because at one point I was trying to stand and pass and he just poof caught me with a really good up kick. I was like, yeah, one of those could end the night. You know? So like I got back down and I just worked from my knees more. And again, landing lots of heavy shots, was able to get into the mount, finish the round on the mount. And I had the feeling I had won that round. I pretty much stole the round because he obviously won the first half, or not the first half, but I think the first third of the round. But then the takedown and all the ground and pound had put the round in my favor. But now we're moving into round two. It was very obvious that I needed to take him down immediately and play the same strategy, which was my strategy for my fighter. And I was successful in doing that. Round two, I was able to rush him to the ground, run him over. He actually was trying to Kimura me off a double leg. That's kind of funny. But once I got him down, then I was able to do a lot of damage with the ground and pound this round because I pretty much had the whole round on top. There was one point where I was standing. I threw the ankles by and then landed a giant hammer over overhand right. And I think that was a turning point because I saw his guard kind of just fall apart after that shot. I was able to get side control. Side control kind of sucks for MMA though. This was like Pride rules in a way. Well, not really. Actually, it was weaker than Pride rules because you couldn't elbow at all. So side mount without elbows or knees is pretty much useless. So I remember I was just throwing some hammer fists, but I really wanted to work into the mount, and I was able then to move into the mount. And I heard someone say there was 1 minute left. And at this point, I'm like, I need to finish this fight, right? Because one thing I haven't mentioned was that my mouthpiece was coming off every like 30 seconds. And the reason why is that once my nose was broken, couldn't breathe through my nose at all. And my mouthpiece was so loose that whenever I opened my mouth to breathe, it was just flying out. And they were warning me because they were thinking I was using it like a stalling tactic. No, it's just that I couldn't keep it in there if I wanted to, right? And I was gassing, right? I was putting out a lot of energy to finish. So when I heard that there was 1 minute left, I'm like, I'm gonna go berserk here and get the TKO. So I started letting my hand, like he was trying to hold me down for a little bit. So like I just kind of rested, composed. And then once I felt an opportunity, I kind of busted up and postured and just started letting my hands fly. And I was throwing both my hands as fast as I can. And I was thinking, do as much damage as possible and also just get a lot of hands on him. And, in modern MMA, and this is 2007, so it's modern-ish, like they see enough punches being landed without the opponent able to defend, they stop the fight. And I'm throwing, connecting a lot. And I'm like, man, like this seems like forever. And up to a point, I felt it was like maybe 10, 15 seconds. Like my hands are getting tired from throwing all these punches. And I have to switch to go to one-arm punches. So now I start punching with one hand because I can't chamber both the hands. And I'm thinking like, what am I going to have to do to get this fight to stop, man? Because I've connected like 20 punches on this guy consecutively. And, he's just like shelled up, but he's getting hit. I'm getting, the guard is pretty open. So I'm getting my punches in. And finally, the referee comes in to stop the fight. And I'm able to get up. I remember at the time my corner wanted to parade me around in celebration. But I was so tired, like I just need to sit down, dude. Like I emptied the tank and then some to get that finish. Yeah, it would have been a problem if I didn't get the finish. I think if I had to go into a third round, it would have been a problem. And he was all right, the opponent. He was able to get up. I definitely, it was interesting. His face was just black and blue the next day, all over here. It looked like an alien. I don't know why. Like I guess I was scoring a lot of forehead shots, just probably from the overhands because I wasn't particularly aiming too well back then. I was just looking for a headshot, so I was just those overhands tend to land where they land. But I remember winning that, and that was a pretty amazing moment. A good comeback from behind in a way, at least from the face. Nothing that surprised me because it wasn't the first time I broke my nose. I've broken my nose multiple times at wrestling matches, and that never stopped me. Like usually from cross faces, or well, not usually. They were both from cross faces that got my nose broken, and I just wrestled through it. I don't think like some people act like breaking your nose is like a fight-ending thing. And from my experience, it's not. It's just like getting a cut or something like that. It's not that big a deal. It does affect your breathing for sure, but it's a fight. Like I expect these type of things to happen. The idea that I would quit because my nose broke is absurd to me. Because, but then again, like I was saying in that, I know there's a quote from me because they interview you before, and like I had said this and I meant it, which I was willing to die to win. Right? I was in that mindset that I would sacrifice everything for victory. And I meant it. It wasn't like some people say it to be cute. No, I was 100% serious. I was ready to die for What would have been, I think we won fight of the night for that fight. And we did win fight of the night for that fight. And I got like 10 grand for that fight, which at the time was good money for 2007 for a guy who was 1-0, featured on television that was posted nationwide, public access TV. That was a pretty good deal. And what's funny, people thought that the nose would be the most painful thing, but it wasn't. The thing that I remember after the fight I was complaining about was my leg. Because that one good leg kick he got in, he got one that like thumped, just went, that was the one that spun me around. And I was like, oh man, this freaking leg is killing me. The nose, like I knew it was hurting, but I'm like, it's not really bothering that much, right? But in the aftermath, uh, they were telling me, oh, we have to take you to the hospital because they have to fix your nose. And I remember I didn't want to because I'm like, man, like, they're gonna charge me a fortune to get this thing fixed. I don't know if the insurance is gonna cover it, blah blah blah. And then they're like, oh no, the event insurance is gonna pay for everything. And then when they said that, I'm like, oh okay, then let's do it. And that was interesting because we had to take a helicopter ride because, like I said, we're like in a jungle, and I guess to take us to the hospital, they had to use a helicopter. So me and George got on the helicopter, flew across, and getting to the hospital was interesting because it was like a freaking war zone, right? And what was hilarious, it was just all the fighters. And there was like one, because there was unfortunately, some traumatic injuries. You imagine the course of 30 fights, there's going to be some damage. But it seemed like there was one girl, I think, that broke her leg, and one guy who the bone was popping out of the arm. Like, there were some crazy injuries. And I remember walking down the hallway and you would see people on stretchers. I was like, what the heck? This hospital has no idea what's going on here. They must be like, where are all these people coming from? Like, Costa Rica doesn't have a military. Like, what is the war here? So in retrospect, mine seemed like a minor thing because I was fine. I wasn't really in any pain. It was just that my nose was broken. And the doctor, they did the x-rays and stuff, and they confirmed it. Yeah, like, and he can confirm, like, it looks like you broke your nose twice prior, one this way, and then the second time it fixed it, kind of. But this third one, he said he cracked it, and it pushed the bones away from each other. And he was saying, with the separation of the bone, the lower part is not going to get any blood flow. It's going to end up dying, and then your nose is going to collapse, and you might have some breathing issues or whatever. And that was enough to scare me. I was like 24 or something. I'm like, okay, do what you got to do and fix it. So they put me under. Uh, I wake up. I got the nose fixed, but they got these plugs all the way inside my nose now. So it's like they put like cotton swabs or whatever it is. They're like this long, and they're like inside your brain. So it doesn't feel great. You can't breathe through your nose at all. Everything's through your mouth, but your nose is still leaking blood. So like I remember going back to the hotel, and they have this like little bib for me that's like around my nose, and I'm just covered in blood the whole time. I'm like, well, if I was looking to spit any game at any of these ring girls or whatnot, it wasn't gonna work. Like, I looked like a freak show, with this contraption on. But spend the next couple of days there, and the Bodog wanted to set up a future fight with me because obviously I got fired that night. They wanted me to do another fight there, and we were like in the works to set it up. But Miguel was also, Eduardo, the matchmaker, was also connected to ADCC, and he was able to help me get an invite into that 2007 ADCC, which was great. The only issue, once again, was that it was like 3 months from then, and I had a broken nose, I had the rib, and they're like, well, I told them, yeah, put me in. I'm like, I'm just going to have to heal fast enough after this to be able to get in there. But I think that definitely helped me get that fight, like that invite. So I'm grateful for that. Great experience overall. And when I got back home, I think it was a month later where like they put it out on TV, and that was the one time in my life where I had some uh, celebrity factor. Because I remember when I would go out, people would recognize me in the street because they had some weird channel. It was called Ion TV, but it was on everyone's TV. It was like CBS, NBC type of thing. So like anybody could watch it. You didn't need to have a paid thing. So you imagine back then they're showing MMA fights. You're gonna watch it, and plus they had like all sorts of beautiful ring girls there. So like a lot of eye candy there too. Uh, so I remember at that time I was dating, and I would be going out on dates, and like people would walk up to my table and go, "Oh man, I saw your fight. It's amazing, this and that," and like they would want a picture or something like that. And great for me, right? Because it made me look like a big shot, you know. But unfortunately, I learned the 15 minutes still ended, right? And that didn't last that long. That was like, and it's funny, you know, when you see it for yourself, right? Because uh, after a few months, no one was approaching me like that anymore. Now, I mean, I still get that from people who are jujitsu nerds, right? Like people who are really into jujitsu and know who I am. That might happen, but very rarely. But at that point, it was like every time I was leaving my house, I was getting recognized. So that was interesting to experience as well, unexpected. And that was my short notice fight story with BodogFIGHT, right? Things that I learned from that: one, don't take a short notice fight. You have to respect every opponent, right? I went in there and I clearly underestimated the threat that this guy posed just because I watched some video, and I guess maybe there was a funny lens or whatnot. He didn't look as big as I thought he was. And two, not going in with somebody who wraps the hands the way you need them wrapped is important, because I remember in the commentary they were saying, "Oh, David's a submission." Hey, they had Hoist Gracie as one of the commentators, actually. Pretty cool, also OG of the UFC, and he was saying, "Oh, as a grappler, he's going to look to try to score submission," and I could hear that because they were ringside, and I was thinking like, I'm not going to submit anything here because I can't grab. My hands were like casts. I was just there to punch, right? Like I couldn't grab something if I wanted to. So that also, obviously, if someone was a grappler, that kind of impaired my game plan quite a bit. I had to go in there just hitting, uh, which I can tell you is a lot of fun, right? Ground and pound to me is like one of the funnest things possible. It's just, I don't know why it is. Maybe I'm a sadist. But it it is very satisfying when you land a clean shot, right? Like a lot of those overhands when they just connect on the chin, poof! It's like, man, uh, very satisfying. I'm not sure why, but it is. And but in any case, having somebody who doesn't understand how you need your hands wrapped, and every fighter needs their hands wrapped differently. I have some guys that don't even wrap at all. It's just a glove, and they prefer that. Whereas some guys need a lot of protection on the wrist. Some need, some protection over the hand. So like it all depends. But in MMA, we usually want a very good grappling ability. Even if you're not a grappler, you still need to be able to grab, right? And this, I remember I could barely close my hand. It wasn't a good job, right? Uh, Obviously, having somebody keep track of my items, like the mouthpiece, was also important. So the lack of preparation for this was very evident to me, right? As far as like me physically, I wasn't in great shape. Uh, my corner team was kind of strung together, not really well thought out. Uh, I was fighting somebody that, well, I knew the winning game plan, and it did work. I really hadn't trained the level of conditioning required to like execute it super clean, or at least where I didn't take a good amount of damage. And again, didn't respect the opponent enough because, uh, again, I trusted video that was like maybe bad angle or just like I said, funny lens. But I mean, it wasn't wrong in the strategy, but I just had a very different impression of the size, right? and coming in so light, also not great. Like I said, I was like, it was either 189 or 191. I can't remember which one, and he was 205. So, and that's me without trying to cut weight, 14 pounds under the weight class, right? Whereas he cut weight, probably 15, 20 pounds to make 205. So, yeah, there's at least a 30-pound disparity of size, which when you watch the fight, it's very evident. And I'll put a link to the fight below just in case, so you guys can watch the whole thing and you can see the interviews and all that stuff. But yeah, that was my best fight story as far as MMA is concerned. And I think it was a good way of defining my style as far as like it would be gritty, takedowns, lots of ground and pound. Part of me wishes I would have done more pro MMA because I think my style worked really well for that. But uh, I got into grappling and I was doing so well with the grappling. I was already world class. And I felt like I really need to take advantage of that opportunity. And I obviously it paid off. I did well, but there is always a part of me like, man, like I wonder how far I could have gone in MMA. And I imagine if I picked the right weight class, pretty far. Because guys around the same era, like Jake, for example, he got very far. Uh, so it would have been something to think about. But I'm not disappointed with my path. Well, one thing I have to mention here that I would be neglecting an important part of history was my pursuit of the Kimura Trap started with Bodog. And what I mean by that was I remember I like Kimuras. I've gotten a few Kimura victories, and as a wrestler, Americana Kimuras, hammerlocks, they're all like familiar territory. And since you could do it from dominant position, is one of the submissions that we like doing as a top oriented guy. But when I took George to St. Petersburg for his Bodog fight, I had mentioned in the beginning, Rodrigo Dam was the guy that we ended up having him as a training partner since I couldn't train. And he was big. He was a very good submission guy. And in particular, he was a big Kimura guy. But he was using Kimuras to take the back. He was using Kimuras to set up arm bars. Like those were like two sequences that you would see from him repeatedly. And I know he would get George with it several times, but I was seeing him grapple with other people, and he was catching everybody with this. So it got my attention because he was using the Kimura Trap idea basically. And those were like the two pathways I saw him using a lot. It was like Kimura to armbar, Kimura to rear naked choke. And I remember like having a mental note of this, like this is something I need to work on. But I really didn't until the Costa Rica one. Because I remember in the Costa Rica one, we had a training session where we were kind of exchanging techniques. Like he was asking me for some wrestling tips, and then I asked him about those Kimura tips. So he showed me his Kimura to armbar setup and his Kimura to a back take setup. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna get these ingrained in my memory and build them because I've seen how successful this guy is in doing it. And that's what started my journey. And now he wasn't the first. I know like people like you can watch Andre Galvao back like in 2002 doing like Kimuras from top half guard and rolling to the back, and Zanji maybe even earlier. So by no means was he or I. And I think Lloyd Irvin had sent me a video of one of the old school catch wrestlers back like in the 1950s doing Kimuras into back mount and stuff. So like this thing's old, right? But uh, that Rodrigo Dam was the one that introduced me to that concept, at least the first guy that really got it across to me. And when I went home, that's when I started drilling this repeatedly. But I basically started with two moves, right? Kimura to armbar and Kimura to back mount. And as I drilled this over and over again, I started seeing lots of different ways of using it. And I said, oh, I could do a Kimura to side triangle, Kimura to head scissors. I could do same side Kimura. And then I started seeing all the different positions I could do it from. Oh, I could do it from, from a sprawl. I could do it from the turtle. I could do it from the guard. I could do it from bottom guard. I could do it from side mount. So I like fleshed out this whole system after that. But without this fight happening, that would have never happened, right? So like in my story, like this is probably the most important fight I've ever had, because without this, Kimura Trap System doesn't show up, and that is probably my most profound contribution to the sport, is making that submission sequence mainstream. Right, like I said, I'm not the one that invented it. I'm not the one that created it, but I definitely did credit for the one that popularized it and systematized it in a way that was very easy for people to pick up. So even though I would say, like, as a learning lesson, like I wouldn't take a short notice fight based off this experience, at the same time, I definitely do not regret this experience. It was a vital part of my life, right? Like my life would take a very different direction if I didn't do this. Uh, I might have not gotten into ADCC in 2007, right? And that would change my whole grappling trajectory, and definitely not having the Kimura trap would change my whole grappling trajectory. So it's funny how these kind of chance events, these are the opportunities that people present you, that you wonder, like, if what would have happened if I would have taken this opportunity, right? And this was definitely one of them. This wasn't like the smartest move from the outside. Like, obviously, if you told me everything that would happen as a result, I would do it. But beforehand, it didn't seem like it was a game changer, right? Like I said, Masvidal had fought in two of them, and he was doing good, but it wasn't like he was skyrocketing to fame or whatnot. So it wasn't evident that fighting in this would be like a career-changing opportunity. It just happened in my case, it was. So for that, I'm grateful, and especially for Miguel Arade for allowing me to jump into that season as a guy who's 1-0. Uh, this probably could have only happened in Costa Rica, like I said, because I think my opponent had like 40 something fights. So anywhere else, the boxing commission would say, like, no, this is a mismatch. But fortunately, they were able to make it, and it worked out in my favor. Anyhow, that's all story I have for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll catch you all next week.